this is what happened. About a year ago, I did a video about the making of Billie Jean, and someone commented on that. It was JP Muso wrote to say, would love a tutorial on how to make this sound. We all have virtual CS80s these days, but very few of us know how to program them. Could you consider sharing how you did it? That would be amazing. Thank you for sharing. So, yeah, I can do that. I generally don't do tutorials, but I don't like the idea of secret recipes either. I can see how the CS80 or a virtual CS80 is a little bit intimidating if you're not really, not that hands-on with synthesizer programming. But it's not that complicated of a beast. The voice architecture, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, is very, it's the same as all of them. It's VCO into VCF into a VCA. Same as a Minimoog or an ARP Odyssey or all the Oberheim stuff. All of it. It's just, that's analog subtractive synthesis in a nutshell. And if you don't know how to program it, you should learn, because it's not that hard to pick up the basic concepts of it. I did a video about that too. I'll put a link to it up there, how to learn how to program any synthesizer. Because the concepts are actually quite simple. It's not difficult. But this, I can see where people would go, look at a CS80 and go, oh my God, look at all of that stuff. But we're going to ignore everything from here over, and we're going to just concentrate. We're going to go one voice at a time. The cool thing about the CS80 is it could do two completely different sounds at once. It was Bi-Timbral. And where this came about was I had long had a string sound based on Stevie's Village Ghetto Land, where I was trying to recreate what he did on a much more complex machine, the GX1, also known as the Dream Machine, and I'm trying to boil that down to the CS80, and I came up with this, It's pretty close. And what I was doing, that experiment that day on the sound check, because I was trying to see, what if I could get by with just using one channel of the string sound? Because this sound is got two versions of the string sound. They're slightly detuned, there's a little variance between each other. And what if I can just do one, and then on the other channel make that into a brass sound? So you've got strings and brass, which is a common thing that you'll hear in music. And so I was fooling around with it, and I couldn't really get it to be what I wanted. But Michael heard it, and I didn't even know he was listening. But he heard it, and he liked it, but he didn't know what I was going after. But so let's get into this. I'm going to hit the new button and set up a completely new sound. What you want to do right off is set the range of it down to 16 feet, both channels. And I'm going to turn off channel 2 and just concentrate on the top layer. And let's go, I'm going to make it easier to see. Let's use this focus feature. And let's just concentrate. We're just on the top layer, and I'm going to go VCO, and then we'll go to the VCF, and then the VCA. And you'll be able to see that it really is actually very simple. Ignore all the orange, if you're using a GX80, ignore all these orange buttons and switches, because those are from the GS1. And this one over here is when you go to a new, it's by default set to CS filter type as opposed to GX. So anyway, these orange sliders don't do anything. What you want, if you're doing a string sound, is you want to turn off this sawtooth wave, turn on the pulse sound, and then set your pulse width. Fairly narrow, around 70, 75, somewhere between there. And the CS80 very conveniently has a dedicated LFO to modulate that pulse width. So you can get some movement in that sound that you would naturally get with a bunch of string players playing together. And you bring that up. Obviously that's quite exaggerated. Okay, that's the VCO. So you got a pulse width that's fairly narrow, it's being modulated. Now let's go to the filter. Let's scoot this over just a little bit. The CS80 had 2 filters. We're not going to use the high pass filter, so just leave that set to 0. We're not using resonance of either filter, so leave these red sliders down to 0. When you select a new patch, it has the low pass filter all the way open. Let's pull that down to where it's about somewhere around 45%, right about there. This is the part that is going to ring out. This is the level that you're going to hear the ringing sound. And it's important to, when you're setting this up, to not have any reverb on whatsoever, nothing in the effects, because what we're doing is we're going to create artificial reverb. What I heard in that sound that Stevie has on his Dream Machine, I could hear that the VCA release was longer than the VCF, and that was simulating not reverb so much in a way, but just a very short reverberation that comes from the wooden hollow body of a string instrument. So to do that on a synthesizer is interplay between the frequency cutoff of the low pass filter and the difference in release times between the filter envelope and the amplifier envelope. So set this up. These sliders called IL and AL. This is, I'm not going to go into explaining them. This is essentially the amount of the filter envelope. It goes about it in a different way. But you want a bit more of the attack level than the initial level. The attack of the filter all the way, set that at 0. The decay is, but critically, the release time of the filter envelope has to be fairly short, something like that. The filter level all the way up. Now, let me scroll over a little bit more. And then this is the attack, is a little bit longer. The decay is about like here. Sustain about, yeah, as it is. And then this is the critical part of the sound. This is where the reverb sound comes from, is to have a long release on the amplifier. So you hear how that sounds like reverb, because you hear it hanging over. This is a little long, and that's a little long. And you have to play with these, because they all interact with each other. But as long as you can hear that artificial reverb, that it's really so short. It's not really reverb. It reminds me of, like I said, the sound of the reverberant sound, the resonance of a hollow body. It's a stringed instrument. And a little bit of a hangover. It's like if you thump on something. There's the initial attack, but then there's a bit of the sound that is in the decay that hangs on after the sharp transients. So there that is. You want to pull the level down a little bit on the VCA and give it some more headroom. So, because you're going to put after the initial touch sensitive and the aftertouch, boom, all the way up. So now, Now it's much more expressive. Okay, that is more or less the string sound. Let's go back. Let's do the brass bit now. So we'll turn that off. Turn the second channel on, and this is a Sawtooth wave. You're not going to hear it right away because for some reason on the GX80 the mix, when you set up a new sound, it defaults to having the mix all the way on 1. Okay, so set this, you know, in the middle position. All right, back to, so Sawtooth, that's all you need for the VCO. Again, on the VCA, I mean on the VCF, this time you don't use, again, no high pass, no resonance, and you pull the low pass filter all the way down and let the envelope do the heavy lifting. And you know, a typical brass sound has that kind of a wah effect. You don't need a lot. You don't have to fiddle a lot with the release of this. So you can depend on, you know, set it up however you want it. It can be, you know, you leave it fairly mellow like this. Also, you want some touch sensitivity to it, so pull its level down even a bit more. And the initial touch response and the after touch response at 10. And in this one, I like to have the ability to brighten it up with velocity and also with aftertouch. So maybe a little more on the after. Okay, so that a decent one oscillator brass sound, and there you have. So now we can let's get out of the. Go back to the full screen. Now you can get both of them going at once. Turn the string back on. And another cool thing you can do is you've got individual detune channels. Now the original CS80 just had detune between channel 1 and channel 2. This one you can make channel 1 go a little bit flat and channel 2 a little bit sharp, and that's what I'm doing here. And that's just some detuning gives it some spread. And I don't know if that's exactly the sound. I would usually spend more time tweaking it, but you've got the basic recipe, and what I encourage you to do is just use your ears and experiment, and you're going to get right in the neighborhood. As hopefully I have. And the other thing to consider is you say, well, that doesn't sound much like it. It's because on the record, there were actually 4 parts. And I recorded 2 of them with this sound, just doubling it. And then there was another one done later where this sound was more or less recreated. And then Michael did a few tracks where he was singing 2 parts of the harmony, so with a ooh, ooh, and that's where the vocal sound comes from. It's missing from here because Michael supplied that himself. But you get the idea. The most important bit is that the fake reverb. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and add some reverb. Turn the reverb on. It's a bit much, but you get the idea. But set it up without the reverb, so you can hear the release times and not get confused. And that's essentially the the recipe, so get to cooking. And again, I encourage you to learn how to program your synths, because you're missing out on half the fun, and you become too dependent on presets.
Do not, my friends, allow yourselves to become addicted to presets. They will take hold of you, and you will resent their absence.
And it's a lot easier when you know how to use these controls, and they're more or less the same on many synthesizers that use this analog subtractive synthesis method. It's all very similar. So you get the concepts down. There's not much to that. Learn that, and then you can apply that to any synthesizer. I learned it on a Minimoog, and that's about the size of it. So have fun with it, and be careful what you do. Don't go around breaking young girls' hearts. And I'll see you next time. Okay. Arrivederci. Ciao.